It is the MLB Strategy Show right here on Awesemo.com. Of course, I am Jason. That is Adam. We're coming here on this Wednesday morning. Of course, games start here in just about 2 hours from now. Adam, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Excited for what should be a really fun day of sports. You know, baseball all day long. First game of the NBA Finals should be a really good time.
Yeah, of course, yesterday we had the first 4 games of the playoffs, all AL games. Most notably, Garrett Cole, if you took him, 7 innings pitched, 13 strikeouts. The Yankees bats, what they were able to do, 15 hits, 3 home runs. Even though Shane Bieber still got the strikeouts, he did give up 7 earned runs in that one. Blake Snell had 9 Ks and 5 2/3. That was pretty much what kind of you expected out of Blake Snell. And Giolito had a good game, 8 strikeouts and 7 innings pitched.
Yeah, 6 perfect innings from Giolito. I think 5 no-hit innings from Blake Snell too. So a couple guys kind of flirting with history didn't quite get there.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about a lot before lock yesterday, was simply of in these playoff games of you got to hit the pitching. You know, pitching is what's going to win in these playoffs. You really didn't see many bats go off outside of the Yankees. Particularly the bottom of the order, the Yankees did pretty well there. But, that's the thing is obviously we got an 8-game slate here today. We're going to break all these games down for you. Of course, we are sponsored by Yahoo. Do want to let you know the free premium content over at Awesemo.com today is the MLB Top Stacks tool. So you got to check out that as you are making your lineups. Of course, as I mentioned, actually going to kick off here in just about 2 hours from now in Atlanta, the Reds and the Braves. Max Fried going to be on the hill for the Braves. Trevor Bauer on the hill for the Reds. So one thing that just kind of looking at our ownership was because kind of in a way a little surprise of how much higher owned Tyler Glasnow is over Trevor Bauer, because we know Trevor Bauer with the strikeouts can come in for you big. 9K on DK, 11-2 on FanDuel, and $51 on Yahoo.
Yeah, I think that the matchup I guess is tougher for Bauer, but really no question how good he is. Comes in with 36% strikeout percentage, which Glasnow's at 38.2%, but lower walk percentage for Bauer, which is particularly important on sites that deduct points for that, obviously. But it also allows him to go a little bit deeper in the games. You don't have the same pitch count concerns, or not pitch count concerns, but pitch efficiency concerns that you do with Glasnow. So I do think that all things. If ownership's equal, I do slightly prefer Bauer. If more ownership's going to Glasnow, I would definitely prefer Bauer.
Yeah, right now we're seeing about 20% more ownership on DK for Glasnow. So that's where I just kind of saw that and I was like, man, I kind of like Trevor Bauer at that spot. As we're doing the show, the Braves lineup has not come out yet. We do know what the Reds lineup is going to be. Senzel going to be hitting off, then Castellanos, Votto, Suarez, Moustakas, Aquino, Winker, Farmer, and then Casali. As you look at this Reds lineup going up against the Braves, it's the fact that we know what the Reds lineup is going to be. What's your take?
Max Fried is typical. The Reds lineup isn't loading for me, but the Max Fried typically does a good job of limiting power. I think he gave up actually his first home run of the season in his last start, but finishes with 0.32 home runs per 9, 22.3% strikeout percentage, 8.5% walk percentage. Really good stuff. Mid-90s fastball, really, really good curveball. Really difficult to hit. That being said, you do have right-handed power here with Castellanos, with Suarez. Nick Senzel's really cheap on DK at 2,500. So I think, and Aquino's really cheap at 2,800. So I think looking to the right-handed power in this lineup makes some sense just because of their salaries, how cheap they are, and how much power they have. But that being said, I do have a lot of respect for Fried as a pitcher.
Yeah, looking at Fried, his prices today, $8,000 on DK, $7,900 on FanDuel, $38 on Yahoo. Let's from a FanDuel aspect with the one pitcher slate. Do you take some chances there at $7,900 with him?
I think it's really tough on FanDuel because of the one pitcher, like you said. I think Fried is good. I think that he certainly has the potential to have a good game here because, again, he's just a good pitcher, really good stuff. But on FanDuel, the opportunity cost is just so high because you're essentially choosing a pitcher with a 22% strikeout percentage and passing up multiple pitchers that are at 30% or higher. We mentioned Glasnow's strikeout percentage already. We mentioned Bauer's. You also have Carlos Carrasco at 29 and change. So the opportunity cost is really, really high on the one pitcher site. So if I am making that play and looking to get to, Max Fried at low ownership, he's only 10% on DraftKings, I would be more inclined to do so on a two pitcher site than on FanDuel.
Yeah, of course, if you do have any questions, hit those up right now in YouTube. We'll answer. Of course, we'll break down these games as we do go on. You can see there on the left-hand side of the screen, there's the breakdown of games that we're going to go to. Cody saying, the Braves are tough. Obviously, you look at that Braves lineup, and they're a stack that I do tend to go to more times than not. But man, it's a tough spot going up against Trevor Bauer, though.
Yeah, it is. And, back to the Bauer-Glasnow conversation, obviously if you can get them both together, that's great. But the matchup is better for Glasnow. He's pitching in Tropicana, but also Toronto just not. I don't think as good a lineup as Atlanta. But there are still some strikeouts in the Braves lineup. You get Acuna, Marcell Ozuna's low 20s, Adam Duvall, Austin Riley, like Dansby Swanson. These guys will still strike out some. And Bauer is just, I think, one of the best pitchers in baseball. So I'm not overly concerned about the matchup. Also, I think it's important to keep in mind that while Bauer is the second most expensive pitcher on the slate, he's not expensive in terms of actual salary. He's only $9,000. So it's not like rostering him is going to really limit what you can do with your bats all that much. It's not like during the regular season where the ace pitchers were typically up at $10,000 or $11,000. So you're not really sacrificing a lot in terms of bats to get to Bauer. So, I think it should be pretty easy to get Bauer plus Glasnow or Bauer plus really any other pitcher and then still get bats that you want.
As you look at the price points, let's kind of start with the Braves and in terms of their bats. Freddie Freeman, 5,200 on DK, Duvall, 4,200, Albies, 4,700. I mean, is there any of these bats on the Braves that whether you think it's the price is just right, too high, too low? I mean, is there a bat in this lineup that you look at and say, man, there's just too much value there to not put him in a lineup?
I don't think so. They're pretty expensive, and Bauer is just really, really good. Freddie Freeman obviously had one of the best seasons in baseball, but he's priced up in this spot. For the season, kind of looking to try and see if you can, find an edge from one side of the plate or the other. 154 expected ISO allowed to lefties for Bauer, 0.093 to righties, struck out 38% of lefties, 34% of righties. Like if you're going to target him, you would prefer to do it with a left-handed hitter. So Freeman would be the one that stands out, but salary is just so expensive for a subpar matchup. The only real thing that could get me to Atlanta is the fact that they are low owned. The top stack pool right now, we have Atlanta in the middle of the pack in terms of top stack percentage, and we have their aggregate ownership a bit below their top stack percentage. So in that aspect, it looks good, but as far as finding value and finding top plays, I don't think they're really there.
Yeah, you got to use that top stacks tool right now. It is free today. They're on the website, just kind of pulling it up in terms of, what we're seeing in terms of ownership shares. Yeah, Lance, I mean, if you can get to them, but ultimately I think it comes down to is, can you find the right value pitchers throughout this slate that you're going to look at in terms of this. So that's something to think about as you're kind of developing these lineups. Next up, we've got game 2 between the Astros and the Twins. On the hill for Houston will be Urquidy, and on the hill for the Twins will be Berrios. Any takeaways you take from game 1 leading into today's game 2 in terms of a DFS perspective?
Not really. The only real thing would be that, the Astros continued to struggle offensively. They obviously won the game, but it still was just a game where they looked pretty uncomfortable at the plate. I don't know how much of that has to do with, not knowing what's coming or whatever, but that's something that we saw during the regular season too. So it's not like it was a game specific takeaway. Outside of that, nothing really.
No buzzers were going off. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
We were joking about, it's like the thing with the Astros, like everyone's just rooting so much against them, that sometimes like I'm sitting there going, okay, man, I just got to look at ownership. And if they're so low owned, I got to look at them. Obviously the Twins, I thought that was a good spot for them yesterday. It obviously ultimately was not a good spot. And I just had way too much Twin stacks. But what's your thoughts on a Twin stack today?
I think that they're one of the more appealing stacks. I think that Urquidy is good, obviously, but relative to other pitchers on the slate, not quite as good. And then also, Houston's bullpen, I think a little bit of a question mark, especially when you compare them to some other teams. So Minnesota, I think, does look pretty good. You have also, I believe this is one of the games with heavy winds blowing out, double checking that right now. But if I remember correctly, 20 to 25 mile an hour winds. blowing out to right center. So that looks good for hitters, particularly guys that would be driving the ball to right center, which tends to be your left-handed bats. So looking to $3,900 Max Kepler, $4,200 Eddie Rosario, $3,300 Jorge Polanco. I think all three of those guys in particular look good. But Minnesota as a stack, I think it's a game where the offense should get a boost from the weather. I think Urquidy is one of the more questionable pitchers given the other pitchers on the plate. And so Minnesota, I think, does look pretty good.
Yeah, when I was putting together my sheet early this morning, he actually did not have a salary on FanDuel at this time. I'll double check to see if they've had it, but of course he's 7,100 on DK and mentioned about Urquidy in that one. Just looking to see if they actually finally put a lineup on him in terms of this one, and does not look like they have one up for him yet. Actually, it looks 7,200 is going to be what he's at on FanDuel. In terms of Barrios, 8,200 on DK, 8,900 on FanDuel, $38 on Yahoo. More interest on DK than the other two?
More interest on DK, yeah. Still not super interested. He's only $200 less than Glass now. Obviously, you have a pretty big ownership gap there. Actually, a massive ownership gap. Barrios projected for 1% ownership. Glass now for 53%. If you're just looking at the pitchers, of course, there's not. Glass now's not 53-1 to outscore Jose Barrios. But again, you have to keep everything in context within your lineup too. If you've made contrarian plays with your bats, you probably don't need to also go to Barrios over Glass now. I think that Glass now, outside of ownership, is clearly the better option. So you would need a pretty good reason to get to Barrios, but that ownership gap is probably bigger than it should be between the two. It's still a tough matchup. Houston has struggled. Despite their struggles offensively, they still don't strike out a lot. They put the ball in play. It's just that they haven't been hitting it particularly hard. Barrios doesn't have the same kind of strikeout stuff that Glasnow or Bauer do. Comes in with I believe 25% strikeout percentage on the season. So still good strikeout stuff, just not on that same level as some of the other guys that are priced not that much more expensive than him.
Looking at the Houston stack here, getting about 7% ownership as we do this show. What's your thoughts on a Houston stack?
I don't love the spot. Right now, they're getting a little bit more ownership than their top stack percentage. If the ownership comes down some, it's certainly a team that you can look to just because of the amount of power in the lineup. But right now, there's, I'd rather, I think, get to Atlanta than Houston right now for a couple of reasons. For one, their chances of success are about the same. Atlanta's getting a little bit lower ownership, but you also get more leverage over the field by going to Atlanta, because if Atlanta does do well, it means that 33% own Trevor Bauer is not doing well. Whereas if Houston does well, it doesn't really help you outside of the fact that your hitters did well. It doesn't give you any leverage because nobody's rostering Barrios. So I think that the way things look right now, I view the chances of success for Atlanta and Houston very similarly, but I think that Atlanta gives you a bigger leg up in tournaments. So I prefer to be getting to them. There are better values in the Houston lineup than in the Atlanta lineup, though. Michael Brantley at 3,700, Kyle Tucker at 4K, Josh Reddick at 2,200. Not that Reddick is any good, but 2,200 for a guy playing is really cheap. So I think that as far as fitting one-offs in as value, Houston's going to be a little bit easier to get to, and that probably is why their ownership's a little bit higher. Whereas Atlanta, you don't really have much in the lineup that looks like a good value.
Of course, this is the MLB Strategy Show for September 30th, 2020. We are sponsored by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, the most trusted name in fantasy sports. Yahoo DFS now includes CSV upload and CSV edit features. When you're looking to play those multiple lines, make better choices, choose Yahoo Daily Fantasy. Next up, we got the Marlins and the Cubs. Sandy Alcantara going to be on the hill for the Marlins. Kyle Hendricks on the mound for the Cubbies. He's $46 on Yahoo. Alcantara, $37 on Yahoo.
Yeah, pretty good spot for Hendricks. Facing Miami, a team that was expected to be one of the worst teams in baseball this year, and got into the playoffs because of the expanded playoffs. Hendricks at 7,700 on DraftKings is a really good salary normally. I do have some concerns about this is another game where the wind's blowing out, and we know that the wind in Wrigley can have a really big impact. It does look like it's only in the low 60s here, so the ball shouldn't carry quite as much. But still, something to keep in mind as far as the wind blowing out. Pretty good matchup, though. Hendricks, not a great strikeout pitcher, but a very good pitcher overall. 20.3% strikeout percentage for the season. The biggest problem outside of the wind that I run into with Hendricks is just that the pitcher pricing is so condensed. If you had Hendricks at 7,700 and Trevor Bauer and Glasnow were like 11K, then there's a really good argument for saving money and going to Hendricks. But since Glasnow is only 8,400 and Bauer's only 9K, and that's not even to mention other really good pitchers on the slate, I don't know how far those savings actually go, and you are making a pretty significant sacrifice in terms of strikeout upside.
The thing with Hendricks that stuck out to me is his FanDuel pricing at 10-6. I don't know how you get to him at 10-6 based on some of the other pitchers at the high end of the salaries.
Yeah, it's really tough there because you're basically just hoping that he goes deep into the game, that he's efficient. You're typically not going to get a ton of strikeouts from him, but you're paying almost the same salary as you are for Trevor Bauer, who literally has almost twice the strikeout, double the strikeout percentage of Hendricks. Same goes for Glasnow, who's actually $200 less expensive. And on FanDuel, you're not even deducted points for walks and hits allowed. So the only negative for Glasnow there is that his pitch count can get up pretty quickly, and maybe he doesn't give you 6 innings, but you're not losing points when he walks guys. So it's even a more favorable scoring system for him, I think, on FanDuel.
Cubs are right now getting the most ownership as a stack. You agree with that?
Yeah, the wind's blowing out. They have a 4.5, kind of climbing closer to 5 implied run total. Sandy Alcantara is not particularly good. He's not bad. Like he's just young, and he's not in the same class as most pitchers on this slate. One positive to point out for him is that he did a really, really good job this season of limiting left-handed power in particular. 0.048 ISO allowed, 107 expected ISO. If you go back to last season, kind of the same thing, 144 expected ISO allowed to left-handed hitters. So where I expect you'll get a lot of ownership going to guys like Ian Happ, Anthony Rizzo, Jason Hayward, Al Schwarber, they're good plays, no doubt about it, but maybe a little bit overowned, and maybe you could actually be a little bit contrary. Like if you're to the Cubs, but not roster the most, the most obvious guys in your stack, prioritizing those right-handed bats, Contreras, Bryant, Javier Baez, maybe a good way to do that, because Alcantara actually has given up more power to righties. And of course, all three of those guys have tons of power.
In terms of the Marlins bats, as you look at the salaries, what do you think is a good spot here today?
Looking at the Marlins, I think Corey Dickerson at 2,800 is a really good price point. Matt Joyce, if he's in the lineup at 2K, neither of them are going to be guys that you're really excited about. And again, from a roster construction standpoint, I don't know how necessary they are because of the condensed pitcher pricing. If the top tier pitching were more expensive, there would be a bigger need to get to these value bats in questionable spots. As is, I kind of doubt you need to get there, and rostering guys against Kyle Hendricks isn't really where I'd like to be. But if I do need to get there, then I think Dickerson and Matt Joyce are the two cheap bats that look the best.
By the way, if you have any questions, hit those up in YouTube. Also, you can hit those up in the premium Slack account as well. We will get to those questions as we do go on throughout this show. Next up, we got another American League matchup, Game 2 matchup of the White Sox and the A's. Going on the hill for the White Sox will be Dallas Keuchel. On the hill for the A's will be Chris Bassett. 7,400 DK, 8,700 on FanDuel, $39 on Yahoo. Dallas Keuchel, 7,300 on DK, 6,700 on FanDuel, $39 on Yahoo. I guess you could probably say we're probably the vice president of the Dallas Keuchel hate club on in DFS. Like he's just I'm not saying I'm unchecking him out of Fantasy Cruncher, but I might be checking him.
I don't think I'll need to. He just won't show up. This game's actually interesting, I think, especially in tournaments, because both of these pitchers are fine. Like neither pitcher is bad. You don't look at either one and you expect them to get blown up, but they're also not great. And there's a lot of power in this game, and neither team getting much ownership. Right now, we have Oakland getting 1.5% aggregate ownership on DraftKings. The White Sox getting 3.1%. The White Sox are in that same grouping with Atlanta, Houston in terms of top stack percentage. Oakland is third from the bottom, only ahead of the Blue Jays and the Brewers. So low probability, but really, really high upside, I think, because of how much power is in these lineups. Obviously, the White Sox have been a team that's made people money all season long. Chris Bassett for the season has allowed 0.86 home runs per 9. Dallas Keuchel's at 0.28. Neither guy gives up a lot of power, but not great strikeout stuff for either guy either. So this is a game where if things hold how they are, I will be interested in tournaments just because there's so much low end power to be had.
Yeah, house to the White Sox is always a team going for it, just kind of looking over at the top stacks tool. And yeah, you mentioned, neither one of these teams. Oakland's the second lowest owned stack of the day. Right.
And if you look at the chances of success, it makes sense. The pricing is fine, but also not super cheap. But as far as just the power goes, not having Matt Chapman in this lineup does water it down quite a bit, but you still get Chris Davis against the lefty that doesn't miss bats. You still get Marcus Semien. Mark Canha's got power. Matt Olson, lefty-lefty matchup, but obviously just a phenomenal hitter. Laureano and Piscotty have power. There's still a lot of power in this lineup, even without Chapman. So I agree with the chances of success being really low, but I do think it's got a really high payoff potential in terms of when it does go off. They have so many guys that have power in this lineup. It's a really high ceiling. The White Sox, I think, are the more likely stack to do well. Of course, tons of power throughout the lineup there, and a little bit more ownership, but not that much more.
Yeah, but overall, you just look at the ownership. Even at you look at the White Sox right now, 3% ownership, 5% as a top stack. That to me is, as you're looking at developing lineups, and like we always mention about, depending on who your pitchers are going to be, I kind of look at the White Sox might be a stack that I look at more than others.
Yeah, completely agree, especially if the ownership, holds how it is. I think we basically just have a bunch of teams grouped together in terms of top stack percentage. You have Atlanta, you have Houston, you have the White Sox, you have the Reds. The White Sox are getting the least amount of ownership out of that group that's between a 5 and 6% top stack percentage. And the White Sox have just as much, if not more, power than any of those teams. So I think that while, you mentioned Oakland's the second lowest stack, I think that just talking between these two teams, and obviously I do think both of them have tournament appeal because of that, but between these two teams, I think that even though the White Sox ownership's a little bit higher, I'd prefer the White Sox just because there are, I think, just kind of more ways to stack them and still get to really good bets.
By the way, just something to kind of mention a little bit about previous game. We talked about the Braves lineup is in. Not really nothing surprising will stick out to you. Markakis is batting 8th, Riley batting 9th, but 1 through 7 is pretty much what you expect 1 through 7 to be for the Braves. So that's just something to kind of mention in terms of that. But we'll move on over to back to the National League with the Cardinals and the Padres. Kim going to be on the hill for the Cardinals. Paddock on the hill for the Pods. Paddock 8,800 on DK, 8,500 on FanDuel, $30 on Yahoo. On the other side, Kim, 7,100 on DK, 7,300 on FanDuel, $34 on Yahoo. Break it down for us.
So a really, I think, interesting spot here with Paddock, who I consider to be one of the better or more talented young pitchers in baseball, but he really had some big struggles this year, particularly with power. His strikeout numbers weren't great. They weren't bad, but struck out a little shy of 24% of hitters, but he allowed over 2 home runs per 9 innings. If you look at the expected ISO numbers for him, didn't really get super unlucky. He ran bad, but still a 231 expected ISO to lefties, 190 to righties. The strikeout numbers against lefties were really low as well at 19.7%, which is kind of surprising because he does have a phenomenal changeup that gets a lot of swings and misses. Typically, that's something that will lead to more strikeouts against lefties, but it wasn't the case this season. So I do have some interest in the Cardinals bats just because of Paddock's issues with home runs this year. Looking to Colton Wong, Brad Miller, Matt Carpenter, like they're not the most appealing names to roster, but if you get the version of Paddock that just did not have command in the strike zone and was just getting lit up in terms of power, then obviously the Cardinals can do some damage there. We do have St. Louis with the 5th highest top stack percentage on the slate at 6.6%, only 4.7% aggregate ownership. So I think the way that looks is pretty appealing. It's definitely a boomer bust spot. If Paddock is on, he has the stuff to just be lights out. So it's not a spot that I'm confident in, but I do think that he showed enough red flags this year that there's upside for the Cardinals. As far as Kim goes, not enough strikeout potential for me to want to roster him. Only a 15.6% strikeout percentage this year. Did a good job of limiting home runs, only 0.69 home runs allowed per 9 innings. The Padres, of course, have tons of power in that lineup. If you're going to let guys like Fernando Tatis and Manny Machado and Will Myers hit the ball, there's always the potential for good things to happen. And we have them with the second highest top stack percentage on the slate. So it really just comes down to, are you able to find the money for the Padres? They do have almost a 5 implied run total. They look good. It's just that, they are expensive.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the thing with the Padres, especially when you look at, Tatis and Machado is how do you fit him in your lineup?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's another situation where the top end pitching being as cheap as it is will, of course, help with that. Maybe you do have to go to one of those cheap value bats that we mentioned earlier that kind of wasn't appealing, but that would help you out. But, I think it is still doable to get, 2 good pitchers plus the Padres. You also do have some value towards the bottom of the projected lineup with Tommy Pham, with Jerks and Profar. So it's not like the entire stack is really expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I think also the thing is, like, who's your value pitcher on DK today? I mean, as we look under 8,000, like, who's the guy you feel like you're going to go to? I mean, I guess, Hendricks would be the one at 7,700, but if it's not Kyle Hendricks, who are you going to?
Yeah, exactly. And even 7,700, it's cheap, but it's not, you don't have that value type pitcher that is, $5K and lets you do whatever you want with bats. Like, the pitching is just condensed on both ends. The bottom tier of pitching salaries is raised up, the top tier is raised down or dropped down. And so it's definitely kind of just interesting from a roster construction standpoint. I think that as far as if you need to just get a really cheap player in your lineup, you're probably going to be just looking to grab a random hitter than, anything you're going to find in the pitching.
As you think about Paddock on the one pitcher slate, and I just want to look to see what kind of ownership he's getting over on FanDuel. Is he a one pitcher slate kind of guy?
I don't think so. I mean, it's just, again, he's good and he's got good strikeout stuff. He just doesn't compare to, Glasnow or Bauer or Carrasco or Bueller. Even, Hyun-Jin Ryu has, better strikeout stuff in his pitching in Tampa. Like, it's just the opportunity cost is so high to not be rostering one of the really elite strikeout pitchers. And there's enough of them on this slate that there's going to be low enough ownership that I don't want to really get off that group of aces, basically.
Yeah, right now, over on FanDuel, he'd be pitcher number 5 in terms of what we're seeing ownership wise.
Yeah, I think that's more or less where he should be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, like, on a FanDuel, would you rather take a Paddock or would you want to pay up a little bit more for a Kyle Hendricks?
Yeah, or I mean, Glasnow is even less expensive there than Hendricks is. So, I think that if you're choosing between Hendricks at his salary and Paddock at his, I would lean towards Paddock. But realistically, I would just rather be getting any of those other pitchers.
I did kind of skip over the Rays and the Blue Jays game, so we'll talk about that one here. We mentioned so much about Glasnow, a part of this game here, going for the Rays. And obviously, Blake Snell had a good game yesterday, and let's look at the Blue Jays bats first off. Obviously, Glasnow is going to have some ownership, but obviously, do you look at the Blue Jays as a sneaky stack?
Not really. So they're one that it really depends on what your strategy is. In large field tournaments, there's always going to be a case to be made for stacking against the highest owned pitcher, especially when they're getting 50+% ownership like Glasnow is. So if you're playing a strategy that contrarian, it's very volatile. You're going to have bigger downswings than people that play more conservative, et cetera. But, if that is a strategy that you play, then the Blue Jays are going to look good. Some successful players that do that. For me, I don't go quite that far off the reservation, and I don't think I'll get to a lot of Toronto because even though they do offer leverage over the field, I think that their chances of success relative to all the other teams are just so low that it's not really a spot that I'm going to want to get to all that much, if at all.
Of course, too, I'll let you know about a promo we got going on over at Awesemo.com right now. Use the promo code Orlando and get a NBA weekly pass for only $5 for the NBA Finals. So you got to check out that promo right now over at Awesemo.com right there, top left-hand corner of the page. Go to Awesemo Plus and sign up for a NBA weekly pass and use the promo code Orlando for only $5. The Rays, they were a stack day yesterday. I looked to a lot, primarily just because the pricing was really good on them. It made putting a stack with them together. I did a lot of pairing Rays and Twins together. Didn't necessarily work out best for me in terms of that one. But what's your take on the Rays going up here against Jin Yu, who is one of the more expensive pitchers on the slate?
Yeah, much less favorable spot here. Obviously they didn't come through yesterday either, but Hyun-Jin Ryu, very good. Comes in with a 26.2% strikeout percentage this year, 3.32 xFIP, 0.8 home runs allowed per 9 innings. Was really good with the Dodgers last year. He's been very good with the Jays this year. Higher strikeout percentage against righties than lefties, which was something that we had I think we'd seen from him in the past as well. This year, a little bit more pronounced, 27.5% strikeout percentage against righties compared to about 21.5% against lefties. I expect a very right-handed heavy lineup for Tampa, so it actually can drive up the strikeout projection for Ryu a bit. I'm not really looking to get to the Rays here. It's just not a favorable park. You also have, just a very good pitcher in Ryu. Tampa Bay, 5th lowest top stack percentage on the slate. Ryu, I don't think he's at 27%, so it is getting some decent ownership, but I don't think that Tampa's a team that's really going to stand out to me.
Yeah, and Toronto on the other side, 2nd lowest top stack percentage. So both of them, obviously, people looking at the pitching matchups in this one. Of course, if you do want to get access to our ownership projections, you got to sign up for an Awesemo Plus MLB weekly pass for $15.95. All you got to do is go to awesemo.com/join, sign up for an MLB weekly pass for $15.95. This gives you access to our player projections, the top pitcher tool. Of course, the top stack tool is free today. It's tools that we use every day and help developing our lineups. As the top pitcher tool is definitely a tool that I'm looking at every day. And of course, those ownerships, what I'm looking at as well. Glasnow right now, is a popular pitcher right now on FanDuel in terms of that one pitcher slate. And I can't disagree with it.
Yeah, me neither.
The only thing I will say about the Rays is that they're a team for years that's been very analytic driven, and I mentioned this yesterday on the show, especially with their hitters. Don't be shocked if they start pinch hitting earlier than maybe you would. That's one thing to think about these Rays bats. I mean, I forget what inning it was. They brought in Hunter Renfroe.
Yeah, Renfroe came in for 6 pretty early. Yeah, it was middle innings.
Yeah, I mean, so that's one of those things to look for. And as we mentioned on the show yesterday, these managers are going to yank pitchers quicker than they normally would, especially if you're talking about those teams that lost yesterday in the American League. They're fighting for the season to continue for another day.
I think it depends on the pitcher too. Pitchers, the pitchers that are kind of middle of the road guys, I think the managers are going to pretty quickly get to the bullpens and play matchups. The guys that are established, like if Trevor Bauer gets in trouble, he's going to be allowed to work through it. At least I would expect. Guys like that, because he's just better than the relievers are going to come in, and he's still your best chance to win. So I do think there's a difference kind of in like the tier of pitcher and how the managers are going to how short their leash is going to be.
Yeah, it's something that you got to pay attention to as you're making all of your lineups. Next up, we will talk about the Yankees and the Indians. Carlos Carrasco going to be on the hill for the Indians. Tanaka on the hill for the Yankees. Of course, we saw it happen yesterday with the Yankees bats going off against Shane Bieber. Cole had a tremendous game last night. Tanaka, the lowest salary pitcher on DraftKings today at $6,700. He's $8,100 on FanDuel, $38 on Yahoo. Carrasco on the other end, the most expensive pitcher on DraftKings at $9,400, $9,500 on FanDuel, $42 on Yahoo. Break it down for us.
Neither of these pitcher prices on DraftKings make a ton of sense to me. I don't think that it's not that I think they're crazy. It's just that relative to the slate, like, why is Tanaka the cheapest pitcher? Why is he less expensive than Sandy Alcantara? Why is he less expensive than Kim facing the Padres or Urquidy facing the Twins? I get it's a tough matchup against Cleveland, and Tanaka's strikeout stuff's pretty middle of the road, 22.3% for the season. But I don't really know why he's the least expensive. But that being said, he is, with the pitching salaries just so condensed, I don't really know how much extra value, extra upside you get in your lineup by going to Tanaka and paying up for an extra batter or whatever. So it's not something that I'm super excited to roster unless I absolutely have to. If I have a team that has $6,700 left at SP2 and then I love everything else about it, I'm not going to blow it up just to avoid Tanaka. But it's not someone I'm really targeting here. The Indians are a good offense. He does have middle of the road strikeout stuff. He has had issues with power this year, which the Indians certainly can take advantage of. And then on the other side, Carrasco, he's a good pitcher, no doubt about it. Comes in with a 29.3% strikeout percentage, 3.65 xFIP. He's really good. Why is he $1,000 more than Tyler Glasnow? Why is he more expensive than Trevor Bauer? Two guys that have higher strikeout percentages, lower xFIPs, just better pitchers than Carrasco is, and neither of them are facing the Yankees. So just really weird pricing here. I think that, Tanaka is someone you can use again, kind of in an emergency situation if you have to get the cheapest pitcher into your lineup. Carrasco, potentially someone you could use for ownership reasons, because I expect his ownership will be down since he is the most expensive pitcher on DraftKings. But even that being said, we have him projected for 17%, which it's not high, but it's a little higher than I anticipated. Just kind of weird pricing here, and I think that both of these offenses actually have quite a bit of upside.
Yeah, I was just kind of looking at the Yankee salaries on DK. It's who's the value bat to create a Yankee stack?
That's the problem, and you see it in the top stack tool. The Yankees actually have the third highest top stack percentage, and they're only projected for 3% aggregate ownership, which is one of the lowest on the slate. But the reason is what you just alluded to. When you look at this lineup, they're expensive. The only guy in the projected lineup below $4,000 is Brett Gardner, and he's probably hitting at the bottom of the order. And, obviously, if you're rostering 5 Yankees, you don't love the idea of using one of those spots on Gardner. So you will kind of have to make some sacrifices elsewhere in your lineup, whether it is paying down a pitcher, whether it is just using some really questionable one-offs and hoping for the best. But with how it looks right now, I think I'd be willing to make those sacrifices, especially as far as one-offs go. We know how much volatility there is in bats. It's not the end of the world if you just have to take a couple of cheap hitters and just hope for the best if it's getting you really low-owned Yankees bats in a game where they do have the third highest top stack percentage, where they're facing a pitcher in Carrasco that does have some home run issues. I think that it's probably a worthwhile trade-off in tournaments.
Now, of course, if you look at the other side in terms of the Indians, Carlos Santana, he's $3,600. Hernandez, $4,100. Obviously, you got to pay up for Ramirez at $5,400. Lindor, $4,800. But in terms of the Indians going up against Tanaka, what do you like?
Just power in general. Tanaka, as I mentioned before, 1.69 home runs per 9 this season. Looking at the splits between lefties and righties, 223 expected ISO to lefties, 164 to righties. So you do prefer left-handed power there, which obviously sets up nicely for Francisco Lindor, Jose Ramirez, Carlos Santana, Naylor, Naquin. They have power from the left side. Naylor and Naquin also both very, very cheap. Certainly guys that I would have no issue using as those cheap one-offs. If I am looking to stack the Yankees or the Padres or something. Both of these guys give you plenty of power in this spot against Tanaka.
Yeah. So, look, it's going to be mostly, it's going to be a game that I'm interested to watch. But to me, it's just about how do I get to those Yankee stacks. The final game of the night will be the biggest favorite of the night, the Dodgers going up against the Brewers. Minus 250 for the Dodgers. Of course, you can check out all of the MLB odds over at Awesemo.com, part of Odd Shopper. Just click that at the top of the screen. That'll give you all the odds for tonight's game. And I know just kind of browsing in chat, there's been a lot of questions, particularly about the Brewers side in this one. The fact that it's game one, obviously they've had some injury situations, but they're going with the opener routine in game one of the playoffs. Brent Sutter is going to be on the hill for him. He's $8,300 on DK, $5,600 on FanDuel, $25 on Yahoo. Walker Bueller will be on the hill for the Dodgers, $8,800 on DK, $10,000 on FanDuel, and $39 on Yahoo.
Yeah, I think that it's tough to get too excited about the pitching here. Obviously, the opener for Milwaukee, you're not looking to go there. Good bullpen behind him. So it's not I think it's a tougher matchup for the Dodgers than it probably appears on paper. You know, they have a 4.5 implied run total. They obviously are a very good offense. We have them with the highest top stack percentage on the slate, but I think that you're going to see Milwaukee matching up and using some really good arms here. So not totally in love with the Dodgers. But you know, that being said, they are projected for less ownership than their top stack right now. But like, I think the way things look right now, I'd rather go to the Yankees than the Dodgers. And Bueller, I think there's concerns about him because he had missed time with his blister issue in his final start of the regular season on the 24th. He only threw 65 pitches. He went 4 innings. You know, does he give you 5-6 innings? Like, how quickly does Dave Roberts look to get him out of this game and get to the bullpen? Mm-hmm. I think is a legitimate concern, especially when you factor in the pitching upside that you have in these other guys on the slate. Like, Trevor Bauer is going to be allowed to throw as many pitches as Trevor Bauer wants, probably. Whereas Bueller, you know, you're hoping that he gives you like 90 pitches. So I think that the ceiling there is a little bit lower than other guys in that price tier.
Yeah, it's I mean, look, it's the Dodgers are always expensive lineup to get to, you know, and I think the question is how do you get to them?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the same way, you know, talked about the Yankees using, I think, just some cheap one-offs, you know, using Naylor, using Naquin, using, you know, a Corey Dickerson or someone like that. It'll let you get to the bats that you want from the Dodgers. But again, it's a stack where there's nothing really cheap in there. Kike Hernandez, the only hitter in the projected lineup even below 4,500. So super expensive stack. That's going to keep the ownership down. It's just a matter of, you know, can you get there without sacrificing too much in the rest of your lineup?
Of course, you got about 400 people watching us right now live on YouTube. Be sure to smash that like button. Let's get those likes over 100 before we get out of here, as we will be answering all of your questions. In terms of a Milwaukee stack, what sticks out to you there in terms of what you're looking at?
Absolutely nothing. Lowest top stack percentage on the slate, actually projected for a decent amount of ownership right now too, because of how cheap they are. It's a team where I guess optimizers maybe will be using these guys as one-offs. Avisail Garcia, Ryan Braun, Dan Vogelbach, these guys are all really cheap and hitting in good spots in the order. So, you know, you could see their medium projections getting them into some lineups where people are stacking more expensive teams. But you have, you know, Bueller, who obviously is a great pitcher, going, I would assume, 5-6 innings. And then you have, you know, the Dodgers bullpen behind them, not something that I'm really excited about. So lowest implied run total on the slate, I believe 3. Don't think there's nothing lower than that. I don't really see any reason to be getting to the Brewers.
Of course, line those questions right now in YouTube about any game that you want us to talk about. We'll get you those questions here. Also, you get them up on the premium baseball Slack channel that we do have for our subscribers. So line that up. Of course, do mention our free premium tool of the day is the MLB Top Stacks tool. In terms of start getting into some questions over in chat. Mr. Mike's daddy says, I wanted to get Yankees. I had to go Hendricks and Tanaka to do it. I guess the question is, do you want to get Tanaka? Are you willing to sacrifice what he could potentially give up and not give you, but allows you to get to those Yankees bats?
I don't love it, but, you know, I don't think that would be like my first lineup. Like, I don't think that's the route that I would go in like single entry or 3 max, but in larger field tournaments, you know, it is fine. Like, you are sacrificing a lot by rostering. The thing is, like, I don't mind getting to Tanaka. I don't mind getting to Hendricks. Getting them together scares me because I think you're sacrificing a lot in terms of potential strikeout upside. Like, there's a really good chance you get, I don't know, 35 combined points from Hendricks and Tanaka, which is fine. But then also a pretty good chance that one of that hour Carrasco, Hendricks, or not Hendricks, Glasnow group, you know, Ryu goes out there and gets like 30 or 35 on their own. So I'm a little concerned, like, having 2 low strikeout pitchers on the slate.
Like, if you're a single entry player, do you play against the ownership and fade Glasnow?
I doubt that. I fade Glasnow in single entry. I think that with there being eight games on the slate, 16 offenses, you're gonna have enough choices amongst hitters to make good contrarian plays that I don't think it'll be necessary for me in single entry to fade him. I guess the counterpoint to that is that typically chalk ownership gets even higher in single entry. So where we have, especially as you move up in stakes. So we had Glasnow projected for, I think, 53% ownership right now on DraftKings. In like the $100 single entry, he's probably like 70 or 75%. So there is, I guess, more merit from that standpoint. But I haven't made lineups yet. My guess right now, though, is that my single entry lineups will have Glasnow.
William says, is Bueller the best pitcher on FanDuel because of his win percentage and K percentage?
I don't think so. He's still 10K. And on FanDuel, you also get the points for quality start. I think that Bueller is likely to be able to go 6 innings, but I do think there's at least some concern because he only threw 65 pitches last time out. And we do know the Dodgers are historically conservative with their starting pitching. So where you have Glasnow also as a favorite with better strikeout stuff for $400 more, I think I would prefer going to him.
In terms of DK, just because they're priced exactly the same at 8,800, who do you favor? Do you say Paddock greater than Bueller or vice versa?
I think it's Bueller for me. Better strikeout stuff than Paddock, just better overall pitcher than Paddock. You know, I think the only like concern that I have whatsoever about Bueller is how short is his leash. You know, I think that because there's a couple ways you can look at that too. Like the Dodgers are big favorites here. They're very likely to win this game. Let's say Bueller's thrown 75 pitches through 5 innings or something, and the Dodgers are up like 6-1. Does Dave Roberts go ahead and just take him out? You know, it's not just how long is his leash if he gets in trouble. It's how long is his leash if the Dodgers are doing what they should and kind of pulling away with this game. So not that I think the most likely outcome is that he has a short start, but I do think it's at least something that needs to be factored in. But that being said, I still think I would lean towards Bueller just because I do think he's better than Paddock. And I think that there's a lot of strikeout upside in this matchup as well.
Do want to let you know about a giveaway we got going on over on the Awesemo Twitter handle. Check out the pinned tweet at Awesemo_com on Twitter to enter our NBA Finals giveaway and win a $1,000 Awesemo Plus Platinum Yearly Pass. Check out that pinned tweet over at Awesemo's Twitter handle, which is at Awesemo_com. Sway says, I'm leading Hendricks and Glasnow for pitching. Is that legit?
Yeah, that's good. You know, the thing is, like, Hendricks, I don't think Hendricks or Tanaka or any of these guys in that, like, 20 to 22% strikeout range, they're not guys that I'm, like, actively targeting, but I don't really mind if they end up in my lineup, you know, because I paid up for bats or whatever. The only thing that concerns me is if I don't have any of the top tier pitchers. But, you know, in this example, you have Hendricks and Glasnow. So you do have one of those elite pitchers. Then you just have a cheaper guy in Hendricks who's perfectly fine. So I do feel a lot better about that pairing than the Hendricks-Tanaka pairing we talked about before.
Eric says, stack the Marlins, win money.
It's baseball.
Yeah.
Not the top of the list of things that I'm looking.
Yeah. ACP says, what games have the best wins? You talked about at Wrigley with the Cubbies. Was there anything that you kind of noticed in terms of, you know, weather conditions that stick out to you?
Yeah, wind blowing out in Wrigley, wind blowing out hard in Minnesota, wind also blowing out in Cleveland. Not as hard, not quite as hard as in Wrigley or Minnesota, but that should also play up left-handed power in particular in Cleveland. So again, you know, looking to the cheap left-handed bats or left-handed bats in general against Tanaka from the Indians, and then also making the Yankees look a little bit more appealing.
The Astros lineup, by the way, is out, pretty much what you expect. I want to say, didn't you mention about Reddick being a cheap play?
Yeah, not somebody that I'm looking to get. Like I'd rather roster Josh Naylor at 2,100 than Reddick at 22. I'd rather roster Tyler Naquin at 2,500. But if you're playing 150 lineups and kind of just mixing through cheap bats, you know, Reddick is cheap.
Yeah. Eric says, is Bauer and Marlins going to be optimal today? Look, if the Marlins come through as a stack, yeah, it's probably a good chance it will be optimal.
Well, and the thing is right now we actually have a lot of ownership going to the Marlins too, because you do have a relatively high implied run total for the Marlins, approaching 4, I think, because of the wins. They're really, really cheap. So you're going to get a lot. If you just run optimal stacks, optimal in the sense of medium projections, you're going to get a lot of, you know, Bauer, Glasnow, Marlins, good one-offs. And I think that you'll see a lot of those lineups played. So right now we have Miami being the second most, basically Miami and the Cubs being the two most overowned teams in terms of aggregate ownership versus top stack percentage.
Something to mention, as News Guy just put it over in our Slack channel, Jeff Passan tweeting that Mike Clevenger is unlikely to pitch in the wild card series and perhaps the rest of the playoffs after a Tuesday bullpen session didn't resolve the short and long-term arm health. So that's something kind of to note there, especially the fact that, Lamet was not the star today either of kind of what the Padres are going to go forward. Frederick says, who's the most likely top-tier pitcher to get blown up, i.e. today's Shane Bieber?
I think Carrasco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would say it depends like how you define top tier, but I think it's Carrasco.
Yeah, I mean, especially going up against that Yankees lineup. Adam says, sorry to miss it, but Hendricks seems chalky. What about a pivot to Bassett? He ends the season on fire, and Oakland desperately needs to win.
Well, we only have Hendricks projected for like 8% on DraftKings right now. So if that holds, I'm not concerned about it. Like, we actually have Bassett projected for more ownership. I do think that Hendricks ownership comes up and Bassett's comes down. But I doubt that you really get enough ownership going to Hendricks because, like I talked about before, with the salaries just being so close together, a lot of lineup builds just aren't going to need those savings. And optimizers are going to prioritize Glasnow, Bauer, Ryu, Bueller, Carrasco, all these guys over Hendricks. So I don't think his ownership will get that high. I don't really think it's going to be necessary to pivot. And also we have ownership going to Miami because of how cheap they are. So using Hendricks actually gives you some leverage over the percentage of the field that's playing the Marlins.
Next up, Michael wants to know, who are some of your favorite stacks?
So I haven't made lineups yet, but just looking at the top stack tool and kind of knowing how my lineups typically go, looking to get to some of the expensive stacks. The Padres, the Yankees both look really good. I think we talked about the White Sox in Oakland, the White Sox in particular, looking like a stack that I'd want to get to. As far as stacking against the good pitching, I think Atlanta would be, I mentioned the Yankees against Carrasco, but I think Atlanta right now looks a little bit underowned in terms of just how good they are, even though, Bauer is great.
Matthew asks, thoughts on Bauer and Glasnow in DK Cash?
Bauer and Glasnow and DK, that's what you should be playing, I would think. TD starting game 2 for the Astros. Oh, this is game 2. Never mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Aiden, I would love to know how you're putting this one together. Bauer and Glasnow with a Padre stack.
I mean, that's the goal, right?
I mean, like first of all, how does that look?
I mean, I think you can. I was kind of playing around with while we talked about the Padres, and you're gonna need those really cheap one-offs. But I'm kind of just trying to build one quickly here and see how it looks out or how it turns out. Like if I start out with Bauer, Glasnow, Machado, Tatis, and then I put in Naquin and Naylor as value, I'm going to have $4,300 per position for the rest of that lineup. So you definitely can make it work. It's just, you're not going to love your cheap hitting.
Yeah. It's like I had Jeffers yesterday, the catcher for the Twins. Yeah. I think he got me a big fat goose egg.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you got that'd be the thing if you can find out to get get some of those high ends. We talked a little bit about Toronto in terms of the strikeouts because there are strikeouts in that Rays lineup. At 8,100 for Rue, I don't mind that one.
No, me neither. The problem, he's getting a little bit more ownership relative to Bauer than I think that he should. But I think that Ryu clearly would be my third pitcher on the slate behind Glasnow and Bauer because, as I said, 27% strikeout percentage against righties. You're expecting a right-handed heavy lineup from Tampa. Pitching in the Trop is favorable. Everything I think looks good for him. It's just that, Glasnow on the other side is only $300 more.
Yeah, of course. Definitely got to mention that right now, our free premium content of the day is the top stack tool. So you can go right now over to awesemo.com. You can check out that stack tool. We mentioned about, you look at the top percentage, Dodgers and Padres are right up there. When you're looking at the ownerships that we're seeing that are not really getting much ownership, we mentioned about the Yankees, the White Sox are both just at 3%.
Yeah, both of those look really good to me. I mean, you're talking about two teams that have power really top to bottom in their lineup and guys that can do a lot of damage. I mean, the Yankees, if you exclude Brett Gardner, but every other hitter in this lineup has power. For the White Sox, you can take out like Nick Madrigal and every other hitter has power. It's really just two very appealing teams in terms of upside.
But if today is just like yesterday, you got to hit the pitching because it was all about pitching yesterday. So that's where you got to line at and find that right pair on DK, find that right single pitcher on FanDuel. So good luck to everyone. Hope you can cash today, no matter what site you're playing on. Of course, be sure to check out our sponsor, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. They do now have CSV upload and CSV edit features. So check out Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports right now. So that is going to do it for this edition of the MLB Strategy Show. Good luck to everyone today playing MLB DFS.